At Volvo, safety's been first since 1927. We've saved millions of lives with the invention of the three-point seatbelt in 1959. At Volvo, we've made driving safer. For you and them. Visit safety.finleyvolvo.com to learn more.
So they say if you give a man a gun, he'll rob a bank. But if you give a man a bank, he'll rob everybody. The good news for you is Private Money Club runs solely on peer-to-peer relationships, which means no banks allowed. So finally, there's a community for real estate entrepreneurs where it is truly a win-win solution. This community is a place where you can connect with other lenders and other borrowers, and the end result's massive growth for you. You get to build your real estate empire, and you get to do it solving other people's problems. So if that sounds like a place you want to be, well then join us. Go to privatemoneyclub.com/Kelly. And if you want $500 off, just add the code Kelly500 and I'll knock $500 off the premier membership. We'll see you on the inside.
Welcome to the Kelly Cardenas podcast, where attitude is everything. I'm so honored to be able to have the sponsors that we do in Finley Volvo of Las Vegas. Jim DiGiulio, if you're ever buying a car, if you ever need a car, if you ever want to experience the top level service. But when you do, be ready, because you will never buy a car in another place because of the way in which he has, the way in which he treats you. And it's just been a completely different experience. My wife used to hate buying cars because she despised the experience, and now she looks forward to seeing Jim because Jim is at that top level. The other one is Private Money Club with Chris Nagel and Money School also. The Private Money Club is something, we just went on an experience down to Mexico, and I'll be at the experience in Las Vegas, and it is absolutely amazing what he's creating, the community that he's creating that is lifting everybody up and helping them to look at money in a completely different way. So after those shameless promotions, I want to welcome every one of you to the show, and I want to thank every one of you for helping us to get into the top 1% globally as far as all podcasts. And it's not because we paid for it. It's because you watched it, you shared it, and I'm going to ask you right now to subscribe, mash the subscribe button so my son thinks I'm cool, so I have more and more subs. But on the show today, it's my honor to have not only one of the baddest storytellers in the world and a person who helps other people to be able to tell their stories, but a good friend of mine. And being able to spend time with him through different events and connect with him. His heart is absolutely amazing. And most of the time when people are really good at things, they just stay in their lane. They stock things just for themselves. But what this man has done is he's focused his whole entire energy on helping other people to be able to tell their stories. Everybody tells me that they have a book inside them, especially when I published my first book. Everyone came up to me and said, I got a book. I've been writing a book for a year. I said, oh yeah, how many pages do you have done? They're like, I've never turned on the computer, but I have a book and I've got this. Well, this man draws them out. And if you are a person out there with a phenomenal story, but your audience hasn't showed up yet, this is the man that will help you to get your audience, to lock into your audience and be able to share your story and impact lives on a completely different level. So thank you so much for being on the show, and please welcome Mr. Chip Hopper.
Wow, what a great intro. I need to take you with me everywhere.
Well, it's great to see you, man. I wish that I would have had the record on earlier, but we're going to get into some of those things. I heard the first time that I heard of Chip, everyone was like, have you met the book Jedi? Have you met the book Jedi? And I was like, wait a second. I mean, help me with this, because there's an acronym to it and an explanation to being a book Jedi. Can you break that down for us right quick?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know how far to take this, but I've read a book a week for a long, long time. I think it's getting close to 30 years now. I'd have to go back and look. But one of the things that I really love about books is the frameworks of books. And I worked with Stephen Covey back in the 90s and really fell in love with the 7 Habits, not because they were new and unique, but because he had taken principles that had been around forever and put them in a way that people understood them. And the concept of the book Jedi came about by this idea of, let's look at the frameworks of books and find the books that work for the right people in the right time. And Jedi actually stands for the journey and evolution, or the journey of evolution, disruption, and impact that a book has on both the writer and the audience. And what I found is people they resonate differently with different things, right? We all have a different frequency, and there are different things that will resonate more with us. So the original intent of the Book Jedi was that everyone could come in and learn about all these books. And I created the company, and everybody loved the name, and I thought it was beautiful. And then all of a sudden people started calling me the Book Jedi. And I'm like, no, wait. This is like everyone is a Book Jedi. But ultimately I finally said, all right, I accept it. After years of people saying you're the Book Jedi, that's just kind of where it stuck.
So help me too, because you talked about that, the framework of a book, because I think a lot of times people just throw things out there. And for the young authors out there, or even the author out there that maybe did a book and it didn't hit, right? You understand how to be able to put things together so it can connect, because a lot of times the audience is ready. They're already sitting in their seats. We talked about this at Secret Knock when we were there. The audience is already ready, but the person hasn't showed up in the way that in the way that the audience paid for their ticket, if that makes sense. I joked with it and said, like, if the Rolling Stones showed up and they started doing Prince covers, although you would like to see the Rolling Stones, you want to hear their music. And you have figured out a way to be able to construct this with a book. Can you kind of dive into that a little bit for us?
Yeah, I can talk about books all day long. so let's see. I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. So one of the books that I really enjoy is like the 5 a.m. Club, right? It's a great book, a great story, but there are a lot of people that are just not designed to get up at 5 a.m., right? I happen to be one of those people. My best work comes like at 10 o'clock at night to 2 in the morning, right? That's kind of when I'm really in flow and really feeling it. And, if we can look at books and find the books that resonate with where we are and who we are, that's where it makes a difference. And so when I work with people to help them write books, what I'm looking for is where are they resonating? What's their frequency? And then when we pull that out, then we can, to your example of the Rolling Stones, we can find the audience that's interested in listening to the Rolling Stones when we tell a Rolling Stones story or song. And for me, this is slightly off the topic, but it brings it back around. And one of the quotes that has always driven me is Thoreau is credited for saying, "Most men lead lives of quiet desperation and die with their song still inside." And for me, I look at it and I'm like, it doesn't need to be that way anymore. For a long time, I think it did, right? You were born 300 years ago. You lived a life that was set for you, and that's where you were, right? You rolled the dice, and if you got into royalty, you had a fantastic situation. And if you didn't, then you just served for 30 years as, tilling the land until you died, right? But I believe that we have the technology and the capability now and the knowledge to be able to move to any life we want. So my goal and my purpose is to help people sing their songs while they're still alive. And if you can sing your song and have it resonate for you, it's going to resonate for others. We are driven by the stories that we tell, and the stories that we tell ourselves and the stories we tell others are what define our lives and the way we live.
So let's talk about this, Chip, because I think a lot of times people hear different stories of people, they're inspired by them, and then they just try and imitate that as opposed to just being inspired by it. And true stories, like, are something that changes the paradigm, right? And so, like, when we were just talking before we jumped on, you said nothing was off limits, so I had nothing's off limits. And as we were talking, I asked you about your children. You have 4 children. You have 1 daughter and three boys. And then I asked you, I said, how long you've been married? And you said you were married for 21 years. And my question was, after 21 years, a lot of times people are just like, you know what? I mean, hell, sometimes people are like, I'm in 10 years. I might as well just stick it out. You came to a point at 21 years where you decided to move on. And as you started to talk about it, I noticed a switch and a change in even your physical stature. I mean, and we're on video, but I noticed a difference in it because you were telling a true story. And how important is it for a person to tell their true story as opposed to what they think the audience wants to hear?
That is a fantastic question. So first, Like there are so many different elements of that statement that you just said that we could dig into. One is, to me, truth is there are big T truths and there are little T truths. And we live our lives primarily in little T truths. The version of me that I know exists only in my head, right? The version of you that you know exists only in your head. We are literally living in a multiverse because anyone that knows you or knows of you knows a different version of you, right? So once you start to accept that, then what is your story, right? You don't want to go and say you did things that you didn't do, but everything that you did can now have different meaning, because who gives it meaning? You do, right? Or other people do that are thinking of you, right? But the only one that matters is you. You can't change. If someone wants to make you the villain in their story, you can't change that. You don't have control over their story that they're telling. The only story that you control is your own story. And for me, that's where you start to go, oh my gosh, I have the power to do anything I want with my story because it's mine, right? So I don't remember exactly what the question was, but that was
Well, no, I mean you hit it head on. But let's talk about that too, because I think a lot of times people will glaze over. I mean, when you've seen the type of success that you have in business, you've got a chance to be around some of the. I mean, when we talk, some of the names that you talk about that are your friends blow my mind. You talk about working with Stephen Covey. My dad was a huge fan of Stephen Covey, and Stephen Mr. now is a friend, and I know it's a mutual friend for you. And Stephen Mr. was unbelievable spending time with him. But a lot of times people look at that part of you and they're like, oh, wow, here's Chip. He's helping, thousands of people tell their stories through books, through podcasts, through interviews, through all these things. Everything must be perfect in Chip's life. Can you help them to understand that it's okay? Like, you talked about in 2019 when we were talking, you went through a divorce. That was a tough time. You had some, there was some struggles with your family. Those are real things that I think connect you on a completely different level, but you're open about them. Can you share a little bit about that, starting with your, with the divorce part, and then what you dealt with your oldest son?
Yeah. So I love that question, and it's. I like to, when people ask me how I'm doing, my response is, I'm amazing. It is amazing. And it's interesting when you say something like that, when people are only expecting, like, they go, how you doing? And you're like, I'm amazing. They'll stop and they're like, what? Right? It's a pattern disrupt that the people don't often hear the answer amazing. And the responses that you get vary from all over the place, from, wow, I'm actually amazing too, to, wow, I wish that I was amazing, right? Or I wish that I was doing amazing. And what it comes down to, I love to joke that my answer is very Dickens-ish, which means, Charles Dickens said, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And that is always the case for all of us. We have things in our lives that are beautiful, and we have things in our lives that are not so beautiful. And it's where we focus, right? So if you come up to me and you say, Chip, how's it going? I could be like, oh my gosh, I had some awful stuff happen. Like my divorce, has still residual stuff that is awful. I have 2 of my kids that haven't spoken to me in 4 years, for example. That is hard because the kids are in the center of my world. But at the same time, they're just amazing, beautiful things happening. So where is your focus, and what are you focused on, is what makes so much of the difference for you. And so people ask me how my life is, and the answer is amazing. It's amazing, right? And so when you say, hey, Chip, is your life amazing? Absolutely. It's absolutely amazing. I've also been through some of the hardest things that people have gone through. And truthfully, I'm grateful for all those things, because the me that I am today is because of all those things. That there are people that often ask the question, what would you tell your younger self? And my response is, I wouldn't tell them anything. Because if you tell them anything, it changes who you are now. And if you truly sit in the space of being present with who you are, you have to accept that everything that brought you here, made you who you are.
So Chip, where's the line though, right? So where's the line where, you know, you have the dreamers, and my pop was a dreamer. He taught me to be a dreamer. My brother is a realist. He's an attorney. You know what I mean? But where's that line where, you know, people talk about a healthy line. I like rose-colored glasses. I put them on all the time, and people will ask me. I don't say amazing, but I say unbelievable, and they're like, "Wow!" And I'm like, because the stuff that happened today was unbelievable. Like, you know, it's always true. But where is the line where a person, you know, when you're telling yourself a story, and you're telling yourself a story? You know what I'm saying? Like, because there are the people that are like, yo, I'm an entrepreneur. And you're like, yo, bro, you live in your mom's basement. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, yo, I got this big deal going. Like, I'm working on it. Like, you ain't working on nothing except playing some Fortnite in your mom's basement. Where's the healthy line for it, of telling, you know, your own story to yourself, or where it can get unhealthy?
That is a question that we could spend like so long on, right? You ask the most amazing questions, right? And, you know, that I don't know that I have the perfect answer for that, because our realities, like, you only see life through your own lens. And we talk about empathy and we talk about what other people see. Even those, like, when we're feeling empathy for someone, we can't feel empathy without it coming through our own lens first, no matter how much we try and take that off. And so when we talk about what is life, what is the story that's true, I think some of the best questions you can ask yourself are, is it true? And is it really true? And if you say I'm an entrepreneur, what does that mean for you, right? If you're not making any money, are you an entrepreneur? Sure, right? I use football analogies a lot because I coach football, and I compare it to coaches, right? There are a lot of people that are like, I'm a coach. Okay, where does your money come from? Well, if your money's coming from you living in your parents' basement and you're working at Walmart, then you're basically a high school football player. You might have a number, you might have a position that you kind of call your own, right? But the reality is that's not putting food on the table, and it's not creating influence. It's not creating impact at the level that you might be talking. But you can move on to a college player, and you can ultimately move on to being in the NFL, right? So that story, you can talk about your greatness, but if you're not in the space where you actually feel and believe into those things, like, here's one thing I genuinely believe. If you believe something, it becomes true, right? The mind can only perceive what it believes possible to be true. So if you genuinely are in a space where you see yourself as something incredible, like, I don't know, you can't help but move into that space, right? So I know there are people out there that talk about themselves in ways that it's just like, wow, you are off your rocker. And some of that is like, I've met some people that are genuinely like that, right? But I think for the most part, people are telling one story and believing another one. And if your gap between the story that you're telling and the story that you're believing, that if you're not being honest with that gap, then you can't get to where you want to be. It's like a navigation tool. Like, if you plug in, I want to go here in your navigation tool and in your car, your map tool, but you don't put in a starting point, it can't get you there, right? If you lie about the starting point, it's not going to get you there either. So there's this space of what is the story you're telling? And we go back to the amazing piece, right? My life is amazing in a lot of ways. I'm doing a lot of amazing things. If I try and block some of the other things that are happening and pretend like they're not, I'm going to live in a space of dissonance with myself. This is again, shifting a little bit. A lot of people talk about being in balance in their lives, and I'm not a big fan of balance. I'm a big fan of harmony. For me, when you talk about balance is standing still. The only way you can be in balance is to be still. The minute you take a step forward, you're out of balance. But if you're stepping in the direction of your heart's desires, then you're in harmony and you're in alignment, right? And when people start to tell their story, I say, okay, the first thing I want you to do is I want you to take your week and write it down in 15-minute blocks. What are you actually doing with your time? And if what you're actually doing with your time is not aligned with the desires of your heart, then you're in dissonance with yourself. And so if you're telling a story that is over here and your calendar is showing something over here, then you need to make adjustments to bring that story into alignment.
So much. I mean, so much in what you just said. It was unbelievable. There's a question for you. Is I've been around the personal development industry my whole entire life. And I gave you a secret knock, which if you haven't been to Secret Knock, honestly, like if you go to one conference a year, Secret Knock would be it. I promise you. If you go to two,
Absolutely.
It would be Secret Knock Prosperity Camp. If you go to three, Secret Knock Prosperity Camp, and then you're going to get on a ship. I said a boat earlier, and this guy got offended.
It wasn't me. I'm just trying to protect you.
I know. But I've been in the been around the personal development industry for my whole entire life. My dad got into it. My dad got into a little shadier side. A lot of times people get that or have experienced that feel. But again, from the time I was in 4th grade, I was around it. What I noticed in the personal development space that has not sat very well with me all the time was how much challenge there was in relationships with the people in personal development. Why is that, Chip?
So,
you know what I'm saying? Because this is what I'm talking about. Like Greg talked about it earlier, and I'm going to give it to you. Greg talked about it with one of the women. She was a matchmaker, and he said, "How about the cobbler's shoes?" And she kind of laughed, and she's like, "What do you mean?" And he said, "How about the cobbler's shoes?" Meaning that you're a matchmaker, but you're single. And so a lot of times what I noticed is in the personal development, as a lot of times, especially on the male side, as the male grows, or as the male is in it more, there tends to be some resistance, or a lot of times it ends in divorce. So can you talk about this part? Because you have experience with it, and I'm not judging it, but it's just an observation I've had over the years.
Yeah, there are two big parts to this, right? The first is the paradox of people are drawn to people with conviction. And if you put someone on stage who says, well, you could do it this way, or you could do it this way, right? Like there's less audience of, oh, I'm going to follow that. So often we find people in personal development who have found a way that they like it, and they can speak it with such conviction that they grow huge followings and huge audiences because of their conviction in it. But they're not truly in a space of being willing to peel back the onion and look for new truths, because they've decided on their truth and they speak with conviction, and people follow conviction, right? And so they can actually be a difficult one to work with in a relationship, because they've come to a way that they believe it is, or a way that they believe it should be, and they preach it with conviction. For me, one of the shifts I like to do is I like to have people focus on tools rather than specific actions. So someone might get up and say, you need to eat this way, or you need to get up at 5 a.m., or you need to do this. What I like to say is, here are tools that will help you figure out what is the best way for you. And even in parenting, right? Often we'll say, you've got to go to college, because if you don't go to college, what's your life going to be? Because I didn't go to college and my life's a mess. So you give them like things they should do, instead of saying, hey, what do you want to be? How do you want to do it? Here are some tools that'll help you achieve what you want to achieve, right? So that's the one side of it. The other side is, and I love to get into this debate when it comes to AI, or to speaking about God, or to speaking about any variance of two individuals. So take my marriage, for example. One of the things I was doing is I was reading a book a week, many of those in personal development. And I did this over decades. And that changed the way I thought. That consumption of knowledge or information shifted the way I thought, which took my path and it shifted it from my wife's path. And the more that you are studying and studying different things, the more your views and your path is going to shift. So when I talk about relationships are two people that are journeying on a similar path, or that they understand a path that they're journeying on together. And you can shift off that path for a while and you come back, but you're kind of following this similar path. Well, if you are learning at a very different rate or learning very different things, it's hard to keep those paths together. And so for me, a lot of relationships shift apart because of the speed of knowledge growth, right? So when I think about an AI system, for example, AI learns at such a rate faster than a human that if it did really become something that you could have a relationship with, it would be almost like the way we have a relationship with a dog, or even us with an ant, right? Because our rate of growth of processing and learning information is so different. So I think those are two of the main reasons that people in that space struggle to stay in a space with someone else.
So let's talk about that then. A person who's going into it, and I remember talking with one of my friends, and he said that he was going through a similar struggle. And if you're out there and you're personally developing, you're reading the books, you're putting in the time, listening to the podcasts, all those things. He told me, he said, I'm growing, and my lady ain't growing. And what I said to him is, number one, I'm not saying that you need to stay with that girl, because I don't know if that's going to be your wife or whatever. But what I said is communicate with her. And so what would your advice be to a young kid who's who's in a relationship, or maybe a young kid who's married, in a young relationship, whatever, and they start to personally develop? How would you prep them based off your knowledge now?
Yeah. So we could spend, this is like, I love your questions, Kelly. We could have like on each one of these questions, we could talk for an hour and a half, right? So relationships is a huge part of what I speak to, right? And your relationship with yourself, the stories you tell yourself, the stories you tell others. One of the things that I believe is the most important in relationships is that communication, right? The ability to be able to speak about your space and what you're feeling, and then listen. Like we go, like, if you've got an advanced degree, like an MBA or something, and you look at the classes you took, almost no one has a class on listening. And to me, listening is something we should be teaching. We should be teaching how to listen, but we teach people how to talk and how to share. But one of Stephen Covey's 7 habits actually is seek first to understand and then to be understood. And one of the things he would do in conflict situations is he would go in and he would ask so many questions that he would get to a point that he could actually give their side of the story in a way that they felt seen and heard. And if you can have someone feel seen and heard, then they're gonna go with you and they're gonna follow you. When I talk about connection and making connections, like in networking meetings and things, I say the best way to build a relationship of trust with someone is to listen. Because the science shows the more that you talk to someone, the more you feel like they see you. So if you want someone to feel like they're seen and trusted and they know you, I don't know, if I think I might have said that wrong. So if you're with someone, they will believe that they know you the more that they talk, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So they won't, because they just shared about themselves, but they'll feel like they know you and they trust you because they were telling their story. And so in relationships, I think that's so important to be able to listen, ask questions, and take the right ownership, right? If someone is feeling sad about something, you don't own their sadness, right? If you go into a situation and they're like, what you said was so offensive to me, well, like, I don't own you being offended, but I can change my behaviors to support you in that, or I can say, okay, I don't want to be seen that way, I don't want to act that way. But often we take ownership for our partner's feelings and emotions when we don't own those. And I got to plug in my laptop. I forgot to plug in my laptop.
Plug in your laptop, man. And what we're going to do, we're going to go to a quick commercial break. But I want to talk about, because I think the cool thing with Chip, with you, is that you speak from experience, not from theory. So when you speak about these things in the listening, like, you've actually gone through it. And what I want to discuss when we get back is I want to go into your marriage. I want to go into that part, because a lot of times, again, we glaze over it. Like, you'll hear it and you'll be like, I was married for 21 years. I got divorced. I got 4 kids. You know what I mean? And I moved on. It was, everything happens for a reason, and then yada, yada, yada. And we move on. And then we're like, my life is amazing. But most of the time, there's people in it right now that are maybe going through a divorce, or they're on the verge, or they're 10 years away from going into a divorce because they're doing things that they don't even realize that they're doing that's going to cause the divorce that they don't want to have. And I want to talk about that, because it's a place where most people are uncomfortable, and they're uncomfortable to talk about it, and so they think that they're alone. And I want you to know, if you're listening out there, if you're going through those things, you're not alone. And what I love about Chip is that he doesn't come from a place of judgment. He comes from a place of experience, and from looking at it and saying, is there things that we can do as we move forward to change your story and the story that you're telling yourself? So, like I said, we're going to go to a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. And when we come back, Chip is going to drop some absolute nuggets on you.
The way I see it is, you've got 2 choices. You can either keep pretending like nothing bad's ever going to happen to you, and then when it does, you're saying, uh-oh. Or you can get ahead of what's coming, so that when it does, not if, you're ready for it. And you're sitting pretty, sipping on Mai Tais next to the pool, working on that Caribbean suntan, because you got it covered. So folks, it's time for you to learn the truth about money. It's time for you to take back control of your money, so that you are ready for what's about to happen. By doing that, you're setting yourself up for absolute success. No matter what comes your way, you're ready for it. And that's what I want for you, and I want to help you with that. So go to chrisnoggle.com and sign up for the Wealth webinar. We do them every Wednesday at 1 p.m., and you need to be there, because it's time to...
Uh-oh, it looks like we piqued your interest in the Hideout. First of all, let me tell you what the Hideout is not. The Hideout is not for hustlers, for grinders, or for people who are looking for a shortcut to what the world calls success. The Hideout is about growing as men, creating lifelong friendships, and having the time of our lives. Are you ready to tap into the endless source that will take you from success to significance? The Hideout is 2.5 days of hiking, biking, and doing the little things that it takes to create lifelong friendships. I find that joy is nothing more than falling in love with your current circumstances and allowing magic to happen. And that's when we see growth in every area of your life. Have you accomplished your goals professionally and financially, and you still thirst for something more? Has success in these areas come at the expense of far more valuable things, like your family, your children, and your relationships? Alignment in business, strategic partnerships, and joint ventures all come from true relationships. The Hideout is designed to get to know people before you'll ever meet them. This is not your typical mastermind. The Hideout is focused on the one thing that will fuel everything: joy. And when joy is overflowing in your life, you'll find growth in your marriage, your relationships, and oh yeah, your business.
We are back with the Book Jedi. He came up with the concept, but he didn't want to be called that right off the bat. But you can't choose your nickname. Like if you choose your nickname, it's a whole different way than when it happens naturally. Journey, evolution, disruption, and give me the last one, the I. Impact. And this, if you just joined the podcast, I want to thank you. We're talking with Chip Hopper, one of the baddest storytellers in the world, but also he helps people to be able to design their stories so the audience that's already waiting is ready to consume it. We want to go back to this part because we're going to talk about marriage. We're going to talk about marriage and the disillusion of marriage also. So Chip, take it away.
Yeah. So marriage is what brings us together today.
No, I mean, Chip, for those of the people that just joined, what we were talking about before we went to the commercial break was I was talking about a lot of times people will say, like, I was married and then I got divorced. Right. And then they'll be like, and everything kind of worked out. And I'm so glad that I had this, that, the other. But they don't talk about the things that went on. And they don't talk about, and I'm not saying that we're airing dirty laundry, but I'm just saying, like, you know, there's so many lessons in these things. And you come from a place of experience and not judgment. You come from a place of wanting to help people to tell a different story. So go ahead, Chip.
Yeah. You know, relationships is one of those things where it's like, we talk about people coming into your life for a reason or a season or a lifetime. And I think often things shift in ways where it would be better if we allowed that shift instead of fought the shift. And I don't know that I want to start there, but you know, I often talk about life in terms of waves in the ocean. If you stand in the ocean and you try and stop every wave that is hitting you, you're going to be exhausted. But if you let every wave roll over you, you're going to be bruised and scratched up from the sand. So the only real way to get above it is to get up on that surfboard and ride the waves that are there and help steer the direction that they go. And so when it comes to relationships, it's a lot like that, right? You know, you have a partner, and almost every partnership, at the beginning of the partnership, you know, somebody will be like, take out the trash. And the other one's like, I would love to do that for you because I love you, right? 5 years later, exact same situation, but the mind state is different. And it's like, oh my gosh, I take out the trash every time. Would you stop telling me what to do and stop asking me what to do, right? The situation is exactly the same, but we're perceiving it differently, or we're responding to it differently. And I think that so much of a relationship is mindset. But I do think that there are times where the shift in your thought process and the way you believe moves you into spaces where you're probably better as friends. You know, I spent a number of years after my marriage with someone else who helped me see things in a beautiful way. And Brookheim, she's amazing, but she has a daughter and a daughter's father, and they still connect quite a bit. I actually would go out for drinks with him, and he and I took the kids trick-or-treating, right? When she wasn't even around because she had to work that evening. But we got back to his place and he's like, hey, let's watch a movie with the kids. Should we see if Brooke can come over? And Brooke was able to get off and come over, and she sat down between us and, you know, put her feet on his lap and her head on my shoulder, right? And there is just a extended family of being able to get along. But she gets along so well with him in a non-married state that her daughter, when she was younger, would say, why aren't you and daddy still together, still married? And the response was, because we get along better as friends than we do as partners. Wow. And but she has this ability to be able to continue to maintain friendships and relationships even after they're not there. And I think that's so important and valuable for our kids. If we can take out that judgment and be like, okay, the marriage isn't working, right? either we need to shift so the marriage is working, or we need to move into a new space. But if we move into a new space, can we still be friends? Can we, and not, you don't even necessarily need to be friends, right? It's like, how can we work together in a way for the good of our children and the good of others? Can we still be in a space where we can go to a birthday party together for one of our kids? I don't think every relationship will look the way that Brooks does with her ex and with me, right? But can you move into a space where you are not the victim in your divorce, but you both stood in a space of adult? And, for me, there were a lot of awful things that happened. And, but there are also things that she feels happened, right? But if we can move into a space of acceptance for what is, and then striving to do our best, that to me, like, one of the things that came to mind when you said to talk about, those struggles is this is one that hits me all the time, which is we love a comeback story. We love someone who is at the peak and tells about being in the valley. But we have a real difficult time being in the valley and sharing that we're in the valley. So the time we most need people on our side, the time we most need that support, we go silent and we don't talk about it. And then we only talk about it when we get to the peaks. And I think if we can talk about some of those things in the valleys, then we can truly change our lives. And part of that, though, this comes back to an earlier point that you had of when is your story true and when are you telling the truth? And you want to tell a story that is, you are rising. You don't want to tell the story of, hey, my ship is sinking right now, because our words are powerful and they manifest. But there are also times where we need that help, and we need to put our trust in those that see us rising even when we see ourselves going down. And, so they can shift that mindset. Anyway, I'm kind of going several different directions here.
Well, Chip, let me ask you this. Like, what was, like, when, with your marriage, when you were talking about the valley, what was the deepest valley for you? Like, what was the place where, because no matter who you are, what you have accomplished or what you've done in your life, there's those times where we're kind of almost embarrassed at the time, thinking that we're the only one. And I want to encourage everybody out there that's maybe in a valley, or you're on your way down into the valley and you are. I want to encourage you, because you're not alone. Like, I think one of the coolest things, and I believe it was a prophet, his name was Eminem. And in 8 Mile, what he did in the rap battle, he actually just said all the things that was awful. And then he dropped the mic and let the guy go, because once he shouted out all the things that were wrong in his life and all the worst things, there was nothing anyone that could say that could hurt him anymore. And I think that part is so powerful. So what was your valley, in your marriage, like before your divorce? What were those valleys that you felt like you were alone?
Wow. One piece that I've never spoken about publicly is, my oldest attempted suicide, and he was 15, almost 16, and he sent me a text. I was at work, and he said, "You might want to come home to clean up the mess before Mom finds it." And her and I were already, our relationship was a little bit rocky at the time, or pretty rocky. But we were still working together as parents. And I immediately called her and said, "Hey, we need to find him." And she ran around the house and found him hanging in the garage, unconscious. And Will was able to lift up this young man that weighed more than she did and take his noose off, even though he was hanging a couple of feet above her. And, experiences like those really shift the mindset of the way we look at things. what was it? Buddha that said the biggest mistake we make, that moment for me was a real shift in saying, look, I was in this marriage because I committed to this marriage. I committed to raise our kids in this marriage. But this is not the type of relationship anymore that I want to show my kids that they can have. And that became a moment of acceptance, of realizing that even greater than my duty was my responsibility to move into a space of joy and be an example to others of how they could live in joy. And my wife and I were not living in joy, to the point that it was disrupting everything about our family. And I look at her now and the person she's become, and it's amazing. It's beautiful. And the person that I become is amazing and beautiful and very different. We're both very different. There's still a lot of things that I would love to see differently than they are, right? I have two of my kids that, because of the difficulty of the divorce, they haven't spoken to me in 4 years. I have a son that barely sees his mom. And these things are all difficult things. When it comes to like I think so often people sit in a space of either wanting to change the past or waiting for something to happen so they can change the future. And when two people say, hey, I'm not getting along with you, I need this to change, and then I'll change, right? What if you made the change first? What if you said, I am in the relationship I want to be in. It is the way I want it to be. And you took the action of changing your mindset before the actions changed. And you started living in the space of being present rather than waiting for something to change in the future. And for me and my wife, I feel like if I could go back and actually live into what was happening and be present in it, we could have separated in a way where we could have still been friends and still helped our kids and moved through things a lot differently than we did, instead of having this belief that I had to like let the waves just hit me and I had to stand against them because I had committed to the way that I was going to do it and the way it was going to be moved forward. Right. I'm not being a proponent for divorce. I'm being a proponent for looking at your life and seeing what is, and seeing what's not fitting with the life that you want, right? We don't know how long we get after this. We don't know how long we get while we're here. But if we're living in a space where we're waking up and we're not feeling that joy, and again, joy and happiness are different. Happiness is a fleeting emotion. And if you spend your life chasing happiness, you won't ever find it. But joy is a state. And so find your way to your state of joy. And the way you do that is to be in harmony by choosing those choices, like we talked about earlier, that are in alignment with your desires. And for me, I wanted to run a business helping run retreats around the world. That was not compatible with my wife. Like, we were not on the same path there. Our religious views had shifted. When you're in relationships, there are things that are different, but there are also what are called significant differences, which I like to refer to as value collisions. And so if you have value collisions, can you get past a value collision? Absolutely. You can have one or two value collisions. You can have different religions. You can have different ways of wanting to spend money, but those create tension. And the more value collisions that you have, the more difficult it is going to be to hold that relationship. I like to put things on a scale of 1 to 10 of importance. If something is a 2 on my importance scale and it's an 8 for my wife, then let's do it her way. That's fine. But if I've got an 8 and she's got an 8 and they're different, then that's where you end up Like that's a value collision. And if it's a 10 and a 10 and they're different, that's a big value collision. So look at those. And if you have those, can you work through it? Is it okay? Like one of the statements that I always stop people on when we're talking about relationships is people will say, I love him, but, or I love her, but if I love them, but if they would just change this, it's like, whoa. No, you don't love them then. Like them is who they are now. Right. And, I love to talk about potential, and I see potential, but I see it differently, I think, than some people think about it. I don't see potential as a future state. I see potential as a current state that you're just not manifesting. So when I walked into a home that we bought foreclosed in 2010, and everybody was like, "Why are you buying this home? It's awful." But I saw a manifested state of that home that was amazing. And now when people walk into that home, which my ex-wife still lives in, they're amazed at what it is and what it is manifest as. But to me, I didn't see it as a future state. I saw it as the current state being manifest, right? It's like with DNA and RNA, we talk about, we all have genes, but it's the ones that are expressing themselves that make all the difference. And so I think that in relationships as well, it's about do you love who your partner is, not who they could be, not what they might do in the future, not them if they just didn't do X and Y. Do you love them, right? And how are you treating them? Are you looking at them and giving them positive intent? Are you listening with kindness? Are you seeking to understand how they feel? Remember, we all have our own realities in our head. You're never going to match up. And the more people you add in, the more complexity it adds in to trying to navigate those waters. So, anyway.
So Chip, if I had your two kids who you haven't talked to in 4 years, if I had them in the studio right now, and I was like, "Hey Chip, I've got a surprise for you. Here they are," and I just popped out of the screen and they popped into the screen, what would you say to them right now?
Well, I'd probably be a blubbering idiot, and I wouldn't be able to say anything for a while. But I genuinely love them, and I love and understand the choices that they're making. And I love them for them, and I want them to feel supported and loved. And I would love to share in their experiences if it's something that feels good to them. And life is a continual journey of making choices that don't always work out and don't always feel good. I want to know them, whoever they are, whatever they want. I'm not here to change them. I'm here to just support them and being who they are. And to me, love is about creating space for others to flourish. Right. I think too often we speak in love in terms of fear, right? We relate it to fear. So I love them X because if I lost them, it would hurt Y. And the bigger the Y of the hurt of loss, the more you feel you're in love. But that's measuring love in terms of fear. And if you can measure love in terms of what can I offer them, what space can I create to allow them to be who they want to be. So I think, this is a little bit off topic with that, but my kids, because it's been years, they don't know who I am. I don't know who they are, because we continue to change, and it has shifted some of my focus. When I was 4 years old, I remember very distinctly, there are very few memories I remember, but I remember that I wanted to have lots of money and no fame, because I believed that lots of money gave freedom, and I believed that no fame gave freedom. So if you took away money, you lost freedom. If you gained fame, you lost freedom. And I lived my life in that way. I mean, I ended up as a ghostwriter for celebrities and professional athletes, and I'm incredibly well known to some of the most, biggest names on the planet. Yet I have like 2,000 followers on most of my social media platforms, right? Like it's like, I think I have a combined like 25,000 subscribers across all different platforms. And yet my clients have 10 million to 20 million to 30 million or even more, having worked with some of the biggest names in movies and sports and everything else, right? And it's been over the last couple of years that I've had a shift in that. I've always believed the income and impact are correlated, right? You can't have one without the other, at least in some sense of correlation. I have now added a third one to that. I truly believe that my ability with impact and income has been limited because I've pushed back on fame, or what I call influence. So I now list all three together. Impact, income, and influence are all correlated. And if you want to make change, you need to be able to look at all three of those pieces. And when it comes to my kids, I have really shifted into this space of I'm ready to step out and be known, because I want my kids to be able to feel that and see that and know that energy. I know they're out there looking for who I am. They just don't want to talk directly with me right now. So for me, I'm looking for opportunities and ways to move into a space where my kids can see who I am. And if they choose to interact with that, then that's beautiful. And if they don't, I want to support and love them in whatever that looks like for them, even if that means I'm not part of it.
I think when you talked about it earlier, you were saying that there's so many different identities that we have. There's the one that we see ourselves as. We see the guy that is at the grocery store that sees us every week, our wife, that they see us as a different person. What are some of the biggest misconceptions of Chip Hopper? And in the event that you got the opportunity to speak to the whole world at once, to set the record straight, this is who Chip Hopper is, how would you explain that?
Wow, that's a powerful question, and one I struggle with, because I see things differently than a lot of people. We talked about my belief in time travel, because I believe we can go back and we can change the meaning of experiences in the past, right? We can't change the experiences, but then I believe in the multiverse, because each of us has a different perception of us in our heads. And I also believe in multiple lifetimes, because if you look at your life, you can see parts of it where you were one way and where you were another. And we change more than we like to admit that we change. One of the books that I've actually been writing kind of on the fantasy side, and maybe I'll give it away a little bit here, but I have the two characters who are very opposed in views of each other in the way they live their lives and the way they perceive things. And it goes through the story of them kind of fighting against each other throughout the story. And at the end, it comes out that they are the same person, separated only by time. They were brought together. And this is my own life. Like the me of 10 years ago would look at the me of today, and he would be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he's divorced. He's not going to church. He's not doing and the me of today would look back and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he's so stuck in a marriage that he doesn't, all these right. We can look at ourselves in different points of our lives. And so when you ask me and you say, what is it that you want to be known as?
No, I mean, Chip, not what you want to be known as, but if we had the whole world, we had your whole audience, like we took every person in the world, and you had 3 minutes, and you were like, this is who Chip is right now, and these are the misconceptions of what you think, but I want to set it straight. How would you set us straight?
Yeah. So I would say that the Chip Hopper is a seeker of truth, and I do my best to be willing to peel back any onion of belief that I have all the way to the core, to the point that I would even discard a core if I found a new truth. I genuinely love people and I want to support people in being who they are. I don't always communicate that the best, but 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 I'm one that I'll speak my mind, but that doesn't mean that that's the way it has to be. I have worked very hard to move into a space of not conforming, but also being willing to hear what other people want. My company, I name my company Disrupt Normal, and then it has a DBA of Book Jedi, right? But the whole concept of Disrupt Normal is that I'm open to seeing things differently, and I'm constantly wanting to hear valid opinions from people that see things differently than I do. I want to learn. I want to grow. I want to live in love and support. And, part of that comes in accepting all emotions, and all emotions are valid. All emotions are real, and not judging those. So to me, if I were to like setting the record straight, like, I love that question, but I've gotten to the point where it's like, I need to, like, it's what do I feel about me? Like, I don't need to convince you to feel differently about me, right? Like you're going to feel whatever you want to feel about me. So to stand up for 3 minutes and say, this is the way you should feel about me, like, that just doesn't fit for me, right? Like I'll share like my life story. I'll share how I feel, but how you interpret it, that's great. That's your story. For me, I'm going to do my best to live in love and to help people build, and to sing their songs. So, and that to me is singing my song.
Well, I think when you say that, as far as the 3 minutes, I mean, you stand up and you say that's it's who you are. I think it's amazing. What misconceptions about you do you actually enjoy? And I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example because there's a lot of people, a misconception with myself is that everything's always working out all the time exactly the way that I want it to. And that's a misconception. Although I like it, it's a misconception. I had a guy tell me that he stopped listening to anything that I said. And I was like, why? And he said, because my life isn't good all the time. And you keep saying that your life is good all the time. I'm like, that's a misconception. I'm not saying my life is good all the time. I'm just saying I choose to look at it the way that I want to look at it. So I make up my own rules. And when I make up the rules, then I win, because one of the rules is I win all the time. So, and no matter what is going on at that time. So I actually I enjoy that misconception. There was a misconception that I had, I remember when I started our company, there was a girl that worked with us, and she walked into a room and she didn't have as much power as she generally did, and I couldn't put my finger on it. And then I figured it out. She was wearing low shoes, so she wasn't wearing high heels. And she always wore high heels, and she always owned the room. And I pulled her off to the side and I said, "What's different about today?" And she said, "I don't know." And I said, "You don't own the room though." And she said, "No, I don't." And I said, "You feel it?" And she said, "Yeah, I completely feel it." And I said, "I know what it is." And she said, "What is it?" I said, "You're not wearing tall shoes today." And she looked at me, we smiled, high-fived, and I said, "I would suggest that you wear high heels until you can own the room without them." We high-fived, we moved on. Well, somebody heard that conversation and said, "Kelly requires all women around him to wear high heels." And I would go into rooms, Chip, all around the country, and women would be like, and I would say something, and they'd have attitude. And then I remember asking, like, "You guys seem to have a little attitude towards me." I was in front of about 150, 200 people. And I said, "You guys seem to have a little attitude. Is there something that I've done to offend you?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "What is it?" And they said, "You make all women wear high heels." And I said, "What?" And this was years later. And I said, "Well, where did you hear that?" He said, "Well, I heard that you make all the women in your company wear high heels." And I said, "Oh my gosh." And I told him the story. So I gave them context to the content, and it helped them to be able to understand. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep.
So I went long on the story, but is there misconceptions of Chip that you actually enjoy and that you play into?
Yeah, there are a couple of them. One is people often tell everyone else around them that I know everyone. Like Chip is connected to everyone. Chip knows everyone. Chip is friends with everyone. Everyone loves Chip. And, that's great. Like, I love it, but there are 8 billion people on the planet. I don't know everyone. Right. But I do have the ability to really build trust quickly with people. And I love that. But it is a misconception that I know everyone. But it's kind of a fun one, right? People joke. They're like, oh yeah, forget the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. It's the 2 degrees of Popper. Right. And, in essence saying that if I don't know someone directly, I know someone that knows them directly. And there's a lot of truth to that, but it's also, it's impossible to really have that. Right. Another is, that started many years ago is I love to wear flip-flops. And so I would wear flip-flops even to meeting or, networking deals where everybody's like dressed in a suit or type of thing. And, never in a disrespectful way. If it's like the dress code is X, I would wear X. But, often when there's no dress code, but it's just kind of it's assumed people show up. I'd show up in flip-flops and jeans when people are in suits. And it unintentionally created this perception that, wow, Chip is so wealthy that he just doesn't care what people think. Right. And the truth was, I just didn't care what people thought. I wanted to be comfortable. Right. But they attach these other meanings to it because they have their beliefs of, wow, I need to be perceived this way in order to be seen as successful. And so that one, like it's like, I became like this famous name especially in Utah, because I wore flip-flops that unintentionally created this perception that I must be one of the biggest financial ballers out there because I just didn't care. But yeah, in fact, on Clubhouse the other day, I got this text from our good friend C-Rock, and he's like, Chip, you got to jump in our room. I'm like, all right, what's going on? So I jump in, and apparently they've been having like a half-hour conversation about how smooth I am and how all the women love me, and like all these things about like why they were actually dissecting why women are all attracted to me. Like, well, there's a huge misperception that I don't mind. It's like, right. And it's like one of those spaces where it's like, I think there's some truth to it because that's not me. Right. Like, I'm not out there trying to be smooth and win people, or I'm just trying to be genuine and trusting and, or trustworthy. Right. So yeah, misperceptions like that happen all the time. And, there's the good and the bad ones. I like, yeah. I mean, we could spend a long time going into some of the perceptions that are, but especially like the last 4 years. So when I was married, a lot of me, I was very much a giver, and I would give just about everything to the point where my highest priorities were less important to me than my wife's lowest priorities. And when I got divorced, I started to move into the space of, okay, who really is Chip Hopper, right? Because after 25 years of being together, 21 years married, I really didn't even have an identity, because my identity was serving my wife and serving my kids. And so over the last 4 years, I've really tried to push myself into spaces of doing things that I hadn't done before, of trying different things that I haven't done before. And many of those things from single one-off experiences, people will be like, oh yeah, Chip is X or Chip is Y. And I'm like, well, not really. I was just like trying to find myself. Right. Like, and almost, in that cliche way of, the midlife, trying to figure it out type of thing. But anyway, yeah, that's a fun question. One I'll have to definitely dig into.
So Chip, you alluded earlier when you said, there was a time as far as going to church and then not going to church. And I want to talk about that because a lot of times people will judge God on man's inconsistencies, right? So maybe they go to, like I had this happen with my younger brother. he came to church one time and with us, and he was like, wow, I didn't know church was like this. And it was just the one that he had went to was different than the one that we went to. But this was a big thing with my pops my pops would always say, like, if you got a check in the mail for $1 million, he said, would you go out and hug the mailman and tell him thank you so much? And I said, probably not. He said, what would you do? He said, you would call the person who sent it to you, not the person who delivered it. And what he was helping me to understand is that God was delivering, like God was sending it to us, but sometimes there was a mailman delivering it. But a lot of times we would get so focused on the mailman, the way that they would deliver it, or the person that delivered it, or at the time when they delivered it, as opposed to the actual message that was coming. And so we would judge God on man's inconsistencies. Did that happen for you? When you kind of stepped away, or, what switched for you?
Yeah, that's another fantastic question. And, first let me state that I very much respect and honor everybody's views and beliefs in the extent that they're not hurting others. Right. For me, my shift happened because of my reading. The more that I read, the more I felt like, I began to feel like man created God in his own image rather than God created man in his image.
Hold on. Say that again real quick. Say
that
again. Say it slow and say it with your chest.
I believe that man created God in his image. So as I look through history, the idea of who God is often very directly correlated to what a good father was of that period, right? The Old Testament God is very much a God that matches what it was to be a father then. Same with the New Testament, same as when we look at it today. For me, I've read just about every major religious text, traveled the world, spoke in India to all over India, and had conversations with them in India. One of the times I spoke to 20,000 live and with over 1 million on TV, talking about prosperity. But one of the conversations that was very prevalent when I was after I came off stage and talked to the audience was, about spirituality. And the first thing I'll say is, like, to me, religion and spirituality are very different, right? And the constructs of religion are different than feeling or being spiritual. I did not leave religion because of the inconsistencies of man or the flaws in man. I left because it didn't resonate with me fully. I feel often what happens with people is they will find a religion that resonates with them at a 30 to 60% range. And then they'll look at the last 30% and go, well, this doesn't really fit, but the rest does. So I'm going to fall in line with this. Right. And for me, what I continue to search for is what resonates, and energy definitely resonates with me. And I believe in the power of prayer, not necessarily because I think there's someone out there pulling strings for me, but because prayer is an energy and a thought is an energy, and anything we put out into the energy field creates, a frequency. And if we have enough people putting out the same frequency, it will resonate that way and will move things that way. So when I talk about my concept of God, it has more to do with each of us inside. We are the gods of our reality. And so I very much believe in a lot of the woo-woo stuff that you hear about. I also believe that the more that we learn, the more woo-woo moves into science. And I believe we will ultimately be able to understand the mind in ways that, like, the mind is so powerful. And, whether, like, I believe in multiple lifetimes, I believe in whether we want to call them spirits or energy, I believe energy persists. I call it like we've got these containers that are holding this energy, but the energy doesn't just dissipate or go away. It has reasons that it's stuck together in the first place. And so I believe those energies continue. And whether or not that has some force behind it that is moving it, or whether it's that force itself, to me, I am able to sit in a space of not knowing. And, I think that one of the best things we can do in life is be comfortable being uncomfortable and be comfortable not knowing. So I try and live my life where if I were to die and there was a God and the God said, Chip, why did you choose to live your life this way? Then I would be able to say, I could honestly answer in a way that felt good and comfortable to me, because I was living in harmony with my inner thoughts. Just one piece to add onto that, like Tony Robbins and others, and I've heard you say this, right? Like everything happens for a reason. I like to shift that saying from everything happens. Successful people realize that everything happens for a reason. I shift it to successful people are able to give reason to everything that happens. And what that does is it shifts the power from something externally pushing on you to you are creating it, right? Like I have a hard time with the idea of if I got hit by a car thinking that God booted me in front of the car because I needed a lesson, right? But I can definitely find lesson and meaning in that experience that happened. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, Chip. So when someone's crafting their story, and I mean, you're the best at this, like when you're listening, I love this, that we didn't talk about like early on when I introduce a person and I talk about like the depths of like the relationships that you have, like, when you're talking about being a ghostwriter for some of the top celebrities, and I've even been in conversation with you and you've been like, hey, do you want me to get my friend X? You know exactly who I'm talking about. Won the World Series, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, and I'm just go silent because I'm a huge fan. And in 2016, when he won the World Series and he was one of the most integral parts of it, like I was in Las Vegas with my brother watching that game and just cheering at the highest, like losing my mind. And you're like, yeah, it's my buddy. I'm going to give him a call real quick. The reason why I say that is because when I lead with something like that, a lot of times people get too focused on the things that you've done. It's amazing to be able to see this journey in our conversation today, because you guys see the individual and the man and what makes up the man. And oh, by the way, yeah, I do all this stuff, speak to 20,000 in front of, digitally 1 million, all these things. If we were to, Chip, if I was to set you in front of, like, if we were able to see the whole world and I was like, okay, there's like 12, I don't know how many religions there are. There's a ton of them. And I don't know how many there are, but let's say there's 12. And you get to see the results of the people who practice the religion. And you had to choose, you have to. This is the game, you have to. And you had to choose a belief system based off of the results of the people that were practicing it. Which one would you choose?
Wow.
And you could only choose one. And I don't want this Mother Teresa answer of like, I would choose them all, Kelly, because they're all beautiful. Like, I'm not saying, I'm saying we look at it and you look at it from a personal, professional, spiritual, financial situation, and you just look at the results. I'm not talking about you look at their belief system, because they could be off the wall. They could be the craziest religion in the whole entire world. But you look at the results of it and you're like, damn, that looked kind of good. Which one are you choosing, Chip?
Yeah. First, I will give the Mother Teresa piece, which I believe all religions, they are all built on these principles that a lot of them are really, really good.
Okay.
I was raised LDS or Mormon. So I spent 40 something years very dedicated to being in that faith. I see a lot of beautiful things in that faith as well.
Absolutely.
unfortunately, I think that in a lot of religions, instead of it, they say based on love, but it's truly based on guilt and fear. And they say love everyone, but there are still sins that they shouldn't be doing. And to me, if it is very hard for me to say, "Oh, I love you," except for your sins, right? That to me is not true love. That really is a judgment. So I think there's that ultimate flaw in many religions. So I am drawn more primarily to some of the Eastern philosophies. Uh, you know, there's a lot of beauty in Buddhism, or in some of those teachings. But again, like I have spectrums for things, right? And there's this spectrum of uh, total Zen of everything is okay to wanting total control. And I think religions fall very much along that spectrum. And I don't know that I really found one that fits in the space for me. I will say that when I traveled to India in 2017, I traveled with the Brahma Kumari, which there are about 12 million followers there. And I was incredibly impressed with the humility of the people and the love of the people. In essence, their prophet brought me in for a one-on-one conversation and wanted to get a picture with me that he could put on his wall. And I'm like looking at his wall, and it is like every important person you've ever heard of. Like he's got Muhammad Ali up there. He's got Mother Teresa. He's got all of these things, all of these Gandhi, him and Gandhi. Like his walls are just covered with presidents and everyone else. And yet he still wanted time with me and to know me. And I felt that with a lot of religious leaders. There are a lot of religious leaders like that in the Mormon and the LDS faith too. I genuinely have so much love for these people in their different religions, and I think so many of these teach such great principles. But I would probably end up in an Eastern philosophy over what I would call a modern. Or a structured religion, I guess, is a better way to say it. So
the reason why I give you a hard time with that, I know it's a hard question because you don't want to turn these people off. But my conversations a lot of times with my best friend Will, he's from 4th grade, and we just have we've been friends since 9 years old. So there's no punches pulled. And we always, when we talk about it, we have different, we don't believe exactly the same. We do believe exactly the same in that each one of us is our best friend. But as far as spiritually, things like that, we differ, whatever. But the one thing that we agree on with it is that a lot of time he was like, man, he said, and he was talking about it. He's like, man, I want to tell you something. I said, what? And he's like, I don't want you to be offended. I was like, dude, you can't offend me. And he's like, I think that Christian people turn more people away from believing in God than all the rest of the people that are against Christianity. And I was like, whoa. And then we sat and we had a conversation. I was like, it's kind of true. The reason why I say it is because a lot of times people's belief system, they'll come down, they'll judge, they'll do these things. And I'm not just saying in just Christian, but I agreed with them in that scenario. And then we had the discussion of if you just look from a material standpoint, from a completely worldly standpoint, what would you choose? And it was belief systems that we wouldn't believe in, but we were based off of what the product is, the way the family is, the way that the people are acting. I would choose that one. You know what I'm saying? And I think that it's a hard I know it's a hard question, but that's why I want you on the show. I ain't going to ask you any easy questions.
Right. I love it.
But Chip, if we were just looking from a complete, humanistic, outward, not spiritual, not these warm my heart. I'm just saying from an outward perspective and saying I would choose that one because of what would it be? We're in a kickball game. You have to choose first. You're the first captain. Which one you choosing?
Scientology.
Bang. Why? Tell me why.
So, I don't like, again, I don't agree with everything from any of these people, right?
No,
But
I understand,
but
but
I think
that's why I love the discussion. I love this part of it. Go ahead.
yeah, but L. Ron Hubbard came up with a lot of things that I think are very powerful in the way that you structure, the way you think, the way your mind works. Very, very successful people have come out of Scientology because of Scientology. If I look at a lot of religions, like Mormonism, which I love, by the way, like the LDS faith and Mormons, I can't tell you the number of people I love in that space. What I feel often though is I see people that are good people that gravitate to religions because they are good people. If that makes sense, right? And the reason I threw out Scientology is because I see it. Man, this is a tough question. Like I'm feeling like edit this whole thing out because I'm gonna have a different opinion tomorrow.
But it's okay, and that's where I want to say, because say when I look at like LDS, which I've got family that grew up in the religion, the things that I see in it that are amazing. Like I look at it and I'm like, some of the most ingenuity that I've ever seen but I realized that for 2 years, you have to go door to door, knock on the door and try and sell something that you don't actually possess. And you hear you hear no all the time. In hearing no all the time, that's one of the number one things that every entrepreneur needs to be able to be successful. So there's no wonder why the financial success in the LDS culture is so high, because you're at a point where you're like, I've heard no. I've done the work. I've done these things. Those are components that are incredible. Like, so when I look at it, that side of it, like I'm inspired by it. I actually wanted to, never executed it, but I wanted to in my company. I wanted to take all the kids who started off and give them 2 months where they didn't even work in our company. And I just bought widgets from Amazon and had them sell it door to door, that the widget was absolutely awful, but they had to sell it door to door for 2.5, 3 months, to hear no all the time, to be resilient, to go through those things, but that's why that's why I wanted to ask the question, is because.
Yeah. Being a missionary was one of the most powerful experiences of my young life. Like I went out at 19 years old, and really had changed my whole perception on life. I have come to believe that we are all in sales, and the sooner you can accept that you're in sales, the sooner you can start to create the life you want. Right.
Hold on, Chip, say that again. but say it slow real quick, because you just dropped a bomb.
I believe that we are all in sales. And the sooner that we can realize we are in sales, the sooner we can create the life that we want. And a lot of people are like, I hate sales. I don't want to be in sales. You're in sales every day. Everything you say about yourself, everything you think about yourself, you are selling something, right? And either you're selling your worthlessness or your worth, or you're selling, your value or the reason that you don't want to exist. You're constantly selling to yourself. You're constantly selling to everyone around you. And if you realize you're selling to yourself, and you realize you can define your reality any way you want it, then you can create whatever you want. You can't create it all, but you can choose what you want to create. Like the saying that you can be anything you want, I believe is true to a certain extent. But if you come at it from the approach of you want to be everything, then you won't ever be anything. And for me, like I taught my kids that, my daughter had a large Instagram account or a TikTok account when she was a young teenager. She was 13, 14, and she had like 30, 40,000 followers on TikTok. And she wanted to stop because she would get haters that came on. And I said, look, unless you're polarizing people, you're not making a difference. Because if you're not moving anybody in the water, then you're not having an impact. If you move someone in the water and they move away from you, then they're likely someone else in the water is coming towards you. So we learned to high five the haters, right? That was kind of a phrase we always said, was high five the haters, because a hater means you've got somebody that's coming towards you. That can be a hard one in life to accept, especially when you're working with some of the biggest names in the world, and all of a sudden you have some of them that don't like you, and you're like, wow, I need to take my own medicine here. um, but I got sidetracked on the question there. I can't remember. The question was, where were we? We were talking about.
I got another one. I got another question for you.
All right, let's go ahead and hit another question.
Right,
We
so
can come back.
I'm a person, right? And I got a phenomenal story. Give me the actionable items, like the behind the scenes. Like it was, have you read the book, Save the Cat?
No.
Okay, you need to read it. It's unbelievable, but it will ruin every single movie that you ever watch from now on. And Save the Cat is under the premise, it's about screenplay writing and about movie making. And that every movie is the exact same story with the exact same timing, with the exact same components. And I challenged this at first, and I was like, there's no way on earth that that's possible. And then they broke down the timeline. They were like, the people meet, and they put a timeline on it. Then they put a time, like a timestamp. And then they were like, then all is lost. They put a timestamp. They put a montage of them, music and things happening. They put a timestamp on it. They put, I can't remember. It was like the hero wins or whatever it is. On cue, every single movie, maybe a minute or two off of this timeline, is exactly the same.
Yep. The hero's journey, the journey of 1,000 faces, all those books speak to that. Yeah.
So help me with this, because there is an art to storytelling. There is a part that when I read a book and it resonates with me, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe it, that there's a guy like Chip that was like, I constructed it to make sure that it resonated with you. Take us behind the curtain. I'm a young kid, or I've got a story that I want to tell and I want to put out that book. What are the components that Chip is going to be like, bang, 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 and the person is going to be freaked out, and then the audience is going to be like, wow, this was for me. Take us behind the curtain.
Yeah. So when it comes to storytelling, often the story that people are hearing is not your story. They're hearing their own story, and their own story resonates with the story that you're telling. And, when you can approach a story with authenticity, vulnerability, and, just stepping into it in a genuine way and speaking with openness and honesty, that resonates with people. And to me, the actual story matters less than the way that you approach it with your feelings. Because people, the saying goes like, people remember how you made them feel, not what you said. And that's so true. And, even for me, like, I'll sit here and, like, I love to quote quotes from books, but I get them wrong almost all the time because it's even as a word guy, like, it's the feeling that those stories create, and it's the impact that they have. We won't even get into the fact of, I'm dyslexic and, I can't spell, and yet I edit for some of the biggest, books out there. But it's like, it's a feeling for me that you get. And as I read these stories, and it's, I've studied all of this stuff from the background of, why stories are, how you move the minutes, how you do these things. But for me, it's almost like I just feel into it. It's kind of like the way you would talk to an artist who is sculpting something out of bronze, right? You can study all the techniques and everything else, but the statues that people are drawn to, man, I know this is a cop-out answer, but it's a feeling. Like, it's like when I sit down with someone to write their story, I am in the state of listening without judgment, and I am just capturing everything of their story And then in my head, it's almost like a download that just says, here's how it's going to resonate with people when you tell it. I don't know if that makes sense at all.
It does. It does. And the thing that I love about it is when I got a chance to talk to Larry Namer and Larry Kasanoff, and I said, what's the formula for making a great movie? And they said, most of the people who are telling you that there's a formula aren't making great movies. They said there's a way to be able to feel, and you have to be present in that moment. And I love that what you're talking about. I mean, but when you're talking about it and listen to this, I was just about to say rewind, but we're not in 1985. So just scrub back or whatever you call it on this podcast, but go back to it. And what you'll hear Chip talk about is you'll hear him talk about some foundational things that, you have to be present, you have to be listening, and you have to be in tune with the story as opposed to trying to technique it to death. And I just think that it's incredible, Chip, because I mean, a lot of times people want to say, well, if you do X and X and X, then you'll get Y. But there's always a human factor, right? There's always a human component that is to it. What would you say if a person is going to tell a story, something that maybe they can be aware of so they don't go down some of the challenges that you've had? And we've said this before, that, procedures are nothing more than a list of your screw-ups. And if people would understand that, then it would free them to make mistakes. Like, so if I make a mistake, I write it down, it becomes tomorrow's procedure. So it's not me telling you what to do. It's me telling you, I screwed up at this thing. Please don't do it again. And we built a multi-million-dollar business on doing that. People would be like, what's the rules? Well, the rules were what somebody screwed up yesterday. So we don't want you to do that. And it gives people freedom. What would be one of those things that in your vast experience, that a storyteller that you could be like, hey, watch out for this thing? What would be a landmine that they could become aware of?
Yeah, I think, again, another fantastic question. One of the biggest things that I think to look at when you are crafting a story or a movie, when I was in college, I helped pioneer the animation program at BYU. And one of the things we always did when we storyboarded a story was we would try and look, almost the Stephen Covey phrase, right? Begin with the end in mind. But if a scene or a story didn't move you forward towards your purpose, then you should take it out. And that's probably the biggest one, right? Often, like I talk about stories the same way I talk about, like, have you seen the movie Inception? Like, I love the idea in Inception where it's a dream within a dream within a dream. And when I'm in conversations with people, a lot of times people will do what I call a conversation within a conversation within a conversation, which means they start telling one story and they have to tell another story for that. And then they have to tell another story. So all of a sudden they've got 4 loops of stories that are open, and you're sitting there going, wow, I don't even remember what was the first story that we were talking about, because we're four levels deep in stories. So, begin with the end in mind of the story that you're telling, and also learn how to end. If you've been on Clubhouse a ton, right? A lot of times people get on Clubhouse, and the first time they get an opportunity to speak, they'll say something good, and then they will just keep speaking because they don't know how to end, and turn the time back over, or, shift out of answering the question. And it's just continues to roll, kind of like I'm rolling right now. Right? But it's one of those things where it's like, if you can take your answer and give it in the shortest way possible. And, we had Charles Vest, Brooke Heim, and I, and we brought in Forbes Riley from time to time, and Lindsay Brooks and others, but we had this Clubhouse room where we would teach people to show or to give their intro. And we would take these intros and we'd scrub them down to, okay, what really matters, right? What's going to get your point across? What is it that you're interested in doing? And then you don't need this story about your son, even though it's a moving story. It doesn't belong in this story. that happens when you speak, but it also happens when you write books. People start to write a book, especially their first book, and they want to include everything. My best response is don't include everything. Pick a topic or a purpose that you want to share and write about it for you, and then put it out. When I talk about a book's story or a book's journey of evolution, disruption, and impact, it is almost always more impactful for all those things for the author than it is for the audience. And, you know, one of the things I love to talk about with people and authors specifically is how their books change them. And it will. You write your book, you go through that thought process, it'll change you. And that's, start writing.
If you got to
Don't
sum up,
don't keep it up here.
was that don't? Well, I think one of the biggest challenges for book writers too is not the first, like they're like, oh, is the first chapter or the point or the purpose. I'm like, no, turning on the computer, like, or picking up the pen or picking up the pencil. That's the part. Sean Finnegan always says to me that the start generally stops you, and if you'll just start and try it. It's incredible what can happen. I mean, Chip, you're incredible, man. You told me a couple of questions. You're like, we could stay on that subject for an hour. I'm sure that most people would like to just sit with you. Why would you choose a ghostwriter over writing a book yourself?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. It comes back to that story I was telling you about being 4 years old and not wanting fame. And so I got to the point in my life where I had a really deep understanding of a lot of concepts that I wanted to be able to share with the world. And I built a space where I could share those things without anybody knowing it was me. And that was really where the ghostwriting came from. And I'm actually shifting out of ghostwriting almost entirely now, because I've come to accept that influence piece is a part of what needs to be there, because I can't sit on a podcast with you and talk about one of my principles in a book that I have under NDA that I can't say was mine. Right. And so I want my content to be seen for my kids, for others. I want to be able to speak to it. And it goes back to income, impact, and influence being tied together in my mind now. So
with an author, a new author, why would an author choose a ghostwriter as opposed to writing their own book?
Well, a ghostwriter can do several things for you. One of the things is creating that framework, which I love to do for people. And I'm not saying I don't do this for people. I still love helping people with this. It's just my focus has shifted partially from being completely hidden to I'd rather co-write books with people than have no recognition or no name in there at all. But I help other people tell their stories in the sense that a ghostwriter can take your words and put them in a way that feels comfortable to read. A lot of the people that I work with are comfortable speaking or comfortable doing other things, or they might not have ever even told their story. Some of my favorite books that have been hugely impactful, like I worked with C-Rock on his book, Rocket Fuel. Right. And when I got the book, it was very much written the way he speaks, which when he speaks, it's beautiful. But when you try and read the way most people speak, it just doesn't resonate. It feels very chopped up. And so what I do is I go through and I take the words that they spoke and I make them sound good in the reading format. It's almost like if when I was working with Richard Dreyfuss on his book, I would talk to him about Shakespeare, because if you've ever heard Richard Dreyfuss read or speak, it is beautiful, right? But he gave me some chapters and I would read them and I'm like, wow, I mean, who is this? It sounds awful when I read it in my head. But then we would sit in a session and he would read it, the exact same words I just read, and they sounded beautiful. And so what I did is shifted them, and I'm not trying to say I'm Shakespeare, but if you read Shakespeare, anybody can pick up Shakespeare. And if you pay attention to way it's structured and the way the sentences are written down, you can sound fantastic speaking Shakespeare, right? By reading it out of the book. And so my intent was to make it so that these books, someone else could pick up the book and their mind and their mouth would say it the same way that the author wanted it to be heard. So that's one of the things. But frameworks are huge. A lot of people, like you said, starting is one thing. Just get started, and I encourage everybody to just start writing. At some point, though, you also need to go, okay, what is the goal? Where am I finishing? Leonardo da Vinci, do you know how long he worked on the Mona Lisa? I think it was like 4 to 7 years, if I remember right. But the only reason he finished is because he died, right? So if he had had someone to say, all right, we've got to the end, this is good, this is where it should be, let's release this one and do another one, then we might have more than one Mona Lisa. But so I think that ghostwriters can help in that sense too, of saying, okay, what is your intent with your story? Where do you want to take it? And what does it look like? As a business leader in corporate America, I would often help people structure their emails even. And if you write an email and you write like an email, all of a sudden you have this email that's a full page long, what I'll tell people is I'm like, look at the last paragraph. In the last paragraph, you probably said what should be in the first paragraph, right? And so if you can say, okay, did I even need all this stuff to get to that message? And that's kind of part of just helping people pull out and see things. And I do that with editing too. One of my favorite authors to work with is Stephen Kotler. He wrote things like Stealing Fire and The Rise of Superman and The Art of Impossible. But I've worked with him on a number of books. He is the best writer, hands down, that I've ever worked with. His ability to write is phenomenal. And there will still be times where it's like he knows something's not working, but he can't see exactly what it is. And I'll go through it and I'll be like, I see this. And with Steven, it's fantastic because he'll go, oh, I see that. Hold on one second. And he'll just like whip out like beautiful, beautiful words, and it like completely just fixes it. Other authors or things I need to, I'll sit down and I'll craft out the words, which, I'm not the guy that just whips it out. I sit and think about it a lot longer, but Steven is fantastic that way. So it just depends on your needs. I'm not the right ghostwriter for everyone. There are absolutely people out there that have these very strict frameworks that they follow, and they call it their recipe for a bestseller and everything else. And to me, I look for the way it feels. Here's a story that is similar but off track, and sorry to be jumping all over. You can end this anytime. But when I was little, my dad was in medical school, and when I was 5, he would actually take me to the cadaver lab when he dissected bodies, and I learned all the muscles from sitting on the table on a cadaver when my dad was dissecting them when I was little, and I fell in love with the muscles of the body. And because I'm into energy and I feel people's energy, it turned into this blend of massage. And I love to give massage and I love to work on people's bodies, but I am not the masseuse that comes in and goes, okay, I start here and I move down to here and I do this and I do the, and they have a very routine that they go through. When I come in a massage, I am listening to the body and the body is speaking to me, and I go where the energy of the body is calling me to be there. And that's similar to how I approach books, right? So when we sit down, we talk about your story, I'm listening to the energy as much as anything, as for how that book should flow. So,
well, you're a true craftsman, man. And I think that when you said, I love what you said here a second ago, where you said, like, I'm not the ghostwriter for every single person. And you're okay with that. And being a craftsman like you are, and being a master at what you do, a lot of times people are going to want a recipe, and they can have that. But I can tell you, which Chip is not going to, because he's humble, it won't turn out the same way. It's not going to turn out at the level of being able to work with Chip. So I think it's incredible. I think one of the things too, Chip, that I learned over my years was that the miracle was at the end of your ask. And a lot of times people didn't know how to accept miracles in their life. And a lot of times what I found was that it was literally right at the end of the ask. And we're not taught to ask. We're not taught to ask for those things and a lot of times a person sitting next to you can really change your life. A person that is listening to you can change your life, but they don't know what it is that you need, or they don't know what it is that your ask is, or that your desire is at that particular time. I've never done this on the podcast, and if you go back and you listen to 259 episodes before you, I've never done this, but I want to ask you, like, to our audience and to everyone listening, what is Chip's ask?
To know you. Like, if you're on here and you are interested in helping build something better for the future, reach out to me and let's connect and see how we can work together to make great things happen. I'm a true believer that you are always one relationship from the life that you are wanting. I think the asking is super powerful. So reach out and ask those things, and ask doesn't obligate me to anything at all. So if you've got something, or you've got something that you have an idea on, let's talk about it. I love talking about ideas. I love working with people that like to execute all those different pieces, right? So reach out and connect. Let's build a community of people that want to make change. One of the things that drives me is I want to build masterminds like the ones that we talk about from 100 years ago that had Emerson and Thoreau and all those people. And, Ben Franklin had the Junto Club that met for like 38 years. And, Napoleon Hill obviously did some things that were incredible. But these are built around communities. And to me, it's not about me. It's about who we can bring together to make great things happen. So that would be my ask. Like, connect. Let's connect and make things happen.
Well, a way that you're going to be able to connect with Chip is April 27th, the Vibe Room in Orem, Utah. Chip is going to be there. And if you want to meet him in person, he's going to be there. It's going to be amazing. We've got a phenomenal lineup. The lineup, Chip, is unbelievable. We're going to spend some time there getting to know people before you ever meet them, and getting people in a room. That's what the Vibe Room is all about. We're going to be doing them in Carlsbad. We're going to be doing them in Utah, and back and forth between the two, which I think is going to be amazing. But those of you out there listening, on socials, Chip Hopper on socials, or is it the Book Jedi?
It's at Chip Hopper just about everywhere. Okay. Bookjedi.com works as well, but most social platforms, it's Chip Hopper.
Reach out. The cool thing is, guys, is the conversation that we had today is really who Chip is. And I get a chance to spend time with him. And I've got a chance to spend time with him. He's got that same smile. He's got that perfect beard, which is going to make you feel bad about yourself. He's got that G.I. Joe beard that is like exact perfect. His hair is going to be perfect, but he is going to connect with you and not judge you because your beard isn't as good. And you got beard game, Chip. Like, your beard is gangster. It's very G.I. Joe of you. And I love it, man. And it has been. I would say
it takes one to know one, right? Like, your logo is your hair.
So, Chip, I started the podcast because of my kids, Maddox and McKenna. Maddox is 11 years old. McKenna's 14. Maddox marches to the beat of his own drum. He's on a different level. Like, he just doesn't care about anything except doing exactly what he wants to do. And I love it. My daughter, McKenna, has one of the most sarcastic personalities, but is one of the most loving human beings you'll ever meet. She's in the arts. My son is more into sports. She's into the arts, performing arts. I wanted to take iconic people like yourself, and I wanted to show my kids that anything was possible. And so what advice would you have for Maddox and McKenna? And if you could use both their names, it would be awesome.
So Maddox and McKenna, I would tell you both to take advantage of the relationships that your dad has, and seek out the people in his network that resonate with you, and you will be able to grow at rates that most people just don't have an opportunity to. I will say one of the most things I've loved most from my own kids is being able to see them hang out in spaces with greatness. And the more you hang out with greatness, the more you'll find greatness in yourself. So that would be my advice. Surround yourself with greatness, and your dad has an army of greatness around him. So he's one of the most amazing people I've ever met. So.
Well, I appreciate it, man. And now's the time where you click the links, you check all the sponsors. Make sure if you're buying a car, you don't even have to live in Las Vegas, but Finley Volvo Cars of Las Vegas, honestly, it is the best car buying experience that you'll ever have in your entire life. If you're looking to lend money, or you're looking to borrow money, and you don't want to go through the traditional side, Chris Nagel Private Money Club. And also, if you want to understand how to become your own bank, chrisnagel.com. You need to check those out. But click the links, check all the sponsors. I want to thank every one of you for getting us in the top 1% globally as far as all podcasts. And do me a favor. For someone who has a story that needs to be told, share this episode with them, because we have the master, the guy that can turn your story that you tell your friends into a mission and into a impactful enterprise that the world can hear and that can change the world just by your story. Ask the questions. Ask the right questions of the right people. You get the right answers. Chip, you have been absolutely phenomenal. I want to thank you so much for being on the show. I want to ask you to be on again, because dude, you're just such an interesting cat. It has been an absolute pleasure, to be able to spend time with you today. And, anyone out there, again, like if you're listening, you're watching. If you're watching and it's on YouTube, subscribe. You should do it. You hadn't done it. 84% of the people who watch our YouTube are not subscribed yet. So subscribe. Do the right thing. If you're listening, though, honestly, if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, drop a review or a comment. It's probably the greatest thing that you can do. I want to thank every single one of you. Chip, you're an amazing, amazing human being, and it has been my absolute pleasure having you on the show today.
Yeah, Kelly, it's been a joy being here. I love the conversations with you. I think one of the greatest ways to lead people is with asking the right questions, and you are a brilliant question asker. And just a true energy that I love. I love hanging out with you. I can't wait for you to be in Utah here on the 27th, and looking forward to everything we do together.
So guys, check out, he said it, April 27th, the Vibe Room. We have Sean Whalen, the creator and founder of Lions Not Sheep. We have one of the top real estate women in all of Utah and in all of the country, Spring Benson. We also have a guy named James Dixon, one of the top motivational speakers in the world. And we've got a special guest named Mirko Mangum, one of the top pro skaters, skated with Planet Earth, helped to be able to build the brand of Zoo York, and now is building a brand called Opus. I tell you, it is going to be a night packed, not only from the stage, but as Chip knows, in the audience. That's where the impact's going to happen. The Vibe Room, April 27th. You got to be there. And honestly, I just talked to Sean, Chip, and you'll be glad to know this thing is almost sold out. We only have 200 spots. There's already 165 already taken. So if you're interested in it, check that out. I love you, Chip. You're amazing, and you're officially off the hot seat.